the eagles over in the Arboretum. It was pretty spectacular.
Oh, they're there? They're back?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
They're building a nest in the azalea area.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
It's pretty exciting. Hi, Pedro.
Hey. Hi, Judy. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Good to see you.
So long. Good to see you too.
Are you still in Canada?
Right now, I am. I was in the US a few days ago. Now I'm back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know you could cross the border.
You can when you have family on the other side.
Oh, I have family on the other side. One of my questions is, can I go visit them?
It's a struggle. It wasn't easy. Lots of paperwork, and you know, when you are right there at the border, you never know if you're gonna go through or not.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad you're able to go back and forth. That's great. Well, why don't we get started? I think, you know, looks like we're a relatively small group. So, Pedro, what if we go around and just people, you know, say hi, and then if they have any specific questions they want you to answer, we can do it that way, and then you can just sort of kick it off, and then we'll have sort of a dialogue. Does that sound okay to folks? Does that sound all right? All right. I'll sort of call on people to start, just because, so you don't have to, you know, step on each other a little bit. So, Anne, why don't you start?
Well, Larry and I have both just gotten our vaccine appointments. So I'm really interested, assuming that we get both of them, that you know, what the difference is after you get them, and what this new strain means for all of that. And I'm going to mute because I have a phone going ding, 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 and I may have to leave for a few minutes.
Okay. Thank you. Daphne, you just introduce yourself, and if you have any particular issues that you're hoping to hear about.
My questions are similar. I have my first vaccine scheduled for February 1st. So one of my questions is, once you have completed the 2 vaccines and the 2 weeks afterwards, can you be a carrier and infect someone who hasn't had a vaccine, or even someone who has? And then if you have had both vaccines, what's the risk probability of like visiting family that hasn't been vaccinated, having sit-down meals with friends who have been vaccinated? And what about riding in a car with someone who has only had 1 vaccination, but just would have tested negative at least 3 days before the car ride? Someone's asked me to pick them up after surgery, and I'm just wondering, since I've never had anybody in my car since March. So those are sort of my general questions, is as we move into this next phase of more people getting vaccinated, what does that mean?
Okay. Deb.
Oh, hi. Yeah. Well, I think we all have about the same questions. Yeah,
Okay, good.
I'm particularly interested in what the data is. I've looked around on various medical sites I'm a physician, so to look around on various sites to find some data about whether we're, once you've been vaccinated, whether you can transmit infection. And the answer to some of these other exposure questions, I play music. I have a friend with a piano, and we're already saying, well, once we're both vaccinated and we wait another 2 weeks, we could probably get together and play safely in our house. But you still need to wear masks if you're if you've both been vaccinated, do you still need to wear a mask? And then on the flip side, I talked to my brother, I guess it was yesterday. He said, who said what I think a lot of Americans do, says, I am really tired of all this, and once I get vaccinated, I'm stopping doing any precautions. This is my musician brother, not my doctor brother. But, it's going to be quite a balancing act for the whole country. And, if we should wear masks to protect people, I'm cool. But those are the questions.
Great.
I'll be-
Marta, hi.
Well, I did get the first vaccine, thanks in large part to Capitol Hill Village sending me emails the first day that. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Mhm.
I'm scheduled for, well, so I went to the H Street Giant and went at the end. They wrote an appointment time on the back of the little card that they give you that shows how and when you've gotten your first shot. And I have to,
Mhm.
I'm a little, I'm not sure that the guy who administered the shot and wrote the data actually entered anything into a system. And so I'm a little concerned that I'm going to show up at the time and place designated and be told that I've missed a step somewhere. So that's my first question. My second question is, will much be answered by other people's questions? As Daphne and I were saying before some of the other people got on, we're both birders, and I am signed up for a bird trip in New England that starts on June 1. So I should be fully compliant by June 1, but it doesn't appear that there are any requirements being imposed on the other participants. And I have like 2 weeks from now to make the final payment. And I'm not sure it's a good idea that I should go on this thing on June 1. So I'll be monitoring everyone's responses for my question.
Okay. How about Steve? Hi.
He's muted.
Oh, you're on mute. Yeah. Can you unmute yourself there, Steve? I can help. Here, let me get you. Sorry, guys. I will. There. Oh. Does that help?
I hope
There
so.
you go.
Good.
Yeah.
I think all the questions that have been asked are good questions. I'd like to hear the answers. Let me give you one more question, which is, after one has had the second shot and waited 2 weeks, is it safe to get on an airplane?
Okay. Good question. Hi, Susan. You look all bundled up. Is your house cold? Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, Susan.
Yes, my house is cold. And I logged on for the right question. So thank you, Steve.
Same question?
Yeah.
You're getting on the airplane. Yeah, I know. That's my plan too. As soon as it's safe to do it, I'm going to do it. Right. So Pedro, what can you tell us?
Oh,
People have some. They want to know. Does life? What happens to our lives after we've gotten vaccinated?
Oh, I wish I knew that. So many interesting questions. I hope maybe you wrote them down, because I have many of them in my mind. But okay, so I guess Judy, maybe just as an introduction, because it will affect everything I'm going to say during this conversation. So, well, as you all know, the scientific community, in which I am still part of, and I'm proud of it, and grateful for that. We made mistakes in terms of recommendations, where at different points at the beginning, mostly of the outbreak, when there was like a really lack of information and misinformation, and the scientific, including the agencies, but we were not very helpful in arriving sometimes to fast conclusions and recommendations. Now I think that everyone's being more careful, but every time I have the chance to talk about these things, I want to make this like categorization. There's this difference between what we know, what we don't know, and what we think or we suspect based on general knowledge, or how similar outbreaks unfold, and things that are mostly comparable, but not necessary or fully applicable to this case. So I guess I like to frame this in this sense, because I will do emphasis on what we know, but you will notice, and I will make sure I communicate that some things we don't know and we suspect, and these things have to be taken as they are. So for instance, and I think I can start by commenting on one question that was repeated, which is what happens after you get vaccinated in terms of what type of care and precautions you have to be aware of. So this is what we know. We know that when you are vaccinated, your risk is reduced by almost 100%. It's not 100% like in any vaccine, but either you get the Pfizer vaccine or the Moderna vaccine. Those are the two vaccines that are around these days. You are pretty protected yourself. You won't get sick, and if you get sick, because that's a chance, you probably have a minor or insignificant presentation of the virus. Having said this, we don't know, although we suspect that once you are vaccinated, it's very likely that you won't transmit the virus to others. But again, I have to say this, the clinical trials, and this is the base of what we know. We know just a few things that came out from clinical trials, experiments. And those clinical trials were not designed to answer some of the questions that we have now. For instance, the question on whether you can be vaccinated and transmit the virus to others. It was simply not tested in the clinical trials. Having said this, it's very unlikely that if you are vaccinated, so what happens when you are vaccinated is that you have your antibodies ready. When the virus gets in, it's quickly eliminated by your immune system. So it's also, following this thinking, it's very unlikely that you can be vaccinated and transmit virus to others, because to transmit the virus, you have to have a certain concentration, a certain amount of virus circulating in your organism. If that doesn't happen, it's very unlikely that you will communicate, that you will transmit. But you will see recommendations that basically, based on this relatively uncertain fact, I will say, even if you got vaccinated, you have to behave like if you were not almost. You have to keep wearing your mask. You have to keep taking all the precautions that you were taking before the vaccination, simply because that specific fact was not tested in the clinical trials. I hope it gives like a sort of an overall answer to this question. You probably will feel that it's useless, or it's like a waste of time or energy. But since we are still uncertain, we have to say, keep using your mask. Yeah, I think Deborah wants to say something. Yeah.
Yeah, what do you know about, I'm assuming that they're doing these trials now about transmissibility after you've been vaccinated. Are you aware of them?
Yeah.
I have not found any.
That's correct. So there are ongoing clinical trials. So the first trials were
So I'm thinking we probably will have some answers in a few months.
We will.
Yeah.
And so the first clinical trials were aiming to the approval of the vaccine. Everything they needed to show was the safety and effectiveness, and they show it. That's why we have the vaccines now. Now, what happens with children? What happens with pregnant women? What happens with asymptomatic transmission post-vaccination? We will know about that. We just don't know it now.
Okay. There was so one of the questions had to do with the new strains and the effectiveness of the current vaccines against the new strains.
Yeah, that's also a good one. I think there's a pretty good level of certainty, because we know once we have the genome, once we really understand how the virus looks like, we know what are the I don't want to make it complicated. We know what are the proteins, the viral proteins that are directly linked to the infection itself. So and we knew from before, this is what we call a high rate mutation virus. It changes a lot, but the mutations that we have observed up to now, including these new strains, they are not different enough to make the vaccine useless. And that's almost like there's an agreement across the board in that sense. The vaccine is still useful, and the new strains are not so different.
What about the South African one? I was reading that might be more problematic.
Because there was a change in the one of the main surface proteins of the virus, and it could be more problematic. We just don't know, but so far it doesn't seem to reach that threshold in which all the vaccine efforts are useless. The virus looks like pretty much the same anyway.
You say that they're not useless. Does that suggest that they might vary in terms of their effectiveness? And does the same kind of truism apply that you're not likely to get sick, and if you do, it would be much more mild?
Yeah, I mean, that's
Is that
a
still true with the
scenario.
new strain? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that goes for the new strain, and we sort of consider the fact that this virus will behave in the future like the influenza virus, for which we have to be ready each year for different presentations. But so far, and there were many. I know there's this one from the UK is got like more press, but there are many mutations reported so far, and none of them are as significant.
Okay. So a couple of questions. Oh, I'm sorry, Anne, go ahead.
Yeah, what exactly does it mean when it says it's much more contagious? I mean, I don't know if any of us have gotten our second vaccination yet, but so meanwhile, I mean, you know, we wear masks, we do social distancing, we wash our hands. Is there anything else we should be doing? We take walks, but we wear masks. If we see somebody without a mask, we get off the street. Is that?
No, the measures are the same.
Okay.
The measures are the same. Yeah, you just need to make sure you comply with those same measures.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there was nothing in terms. Sorry. There was nothing in terms of, you know, like changes in policy, like, oh, now social distance is less than 6 feet, or the face mask work more or less than they worked before. There's nothing like that.
Okay. There were a number of people asked about traveling specifically. So can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I think it goes under the same idea. If you are vaccinated, even if you didn't get your second dose after the first one, you are not fully, but way more covered than if you were not vaccinated. You have to assume and understand that vaccination is covering you. And as far as we don't know if you are potentially a vector, if you are traveling, you'll be fine, but you have to consider everyone else who's traveling with you. However, I was, I don't know who was, it was Marta. Someone was saying that they were traveling on June.
Yeah.
The vaccination, the campaign is still messy and it's delayed, but the perspectives, the scenario in June will be so much better. I wish I could show you some of the modeling. You know, we're all the time trying to predict where it's going, and most of these exercises are showing that after May, even if, you know, population is vaccinated at this slow rate, we will be talking about something completely different by then.
Great. Go ahead, Deb.
Because Marta's going on a birding trip, and I've been on a bunch of birding trips myself. And it's likely that you're going to all be in a small vehicle together birding. You usually get into a small van and you go from site to site to bird, which might make it, if there's not a requirement that everybody be vaccinated, it might make it at least more risky for the other participants. That might be something to consider. It's
Marta,
not just getting on the airplane and going to the trip, in other words.
Marta, afterwards, I don't know whether you have my phone number. I'll send it to you. We can talk, because I've got a couple of friends who've actually been on several birding trips already, and I can relate to you
my
their
phone number in
experience.
I'll put my contact information in.
Yeah, so far I've been on birding trips where the numbers are severely limited and every household is in their own car and you're only outdoors. But the thing
Mhm.
on June 1 would be exactly as Deb said, we would be in a van, not really crammed together, but still, probably 8 people in a 16-person van kind of thing. And we would be eating together and staying in lodging that probably has common areas. So different from the sorts of things that I've been doing and feeling comfortable doing completely outdoors and with a very small number of people.
So
It will be interesting to
sounds
know if
like-
the others are vaccinated, if the rest of the members of the trip are going to be vaccinated by then.
But it sounds like the risk is to the people who are not vaccinated. So that
Right.
Marta, if you've had your vaccination, you've had your second dose, you've waited the 2 weeks, which you will have. It sounds like you're gonna the risk is not to you.
Right.
The risk is potentially to the others. So
Yeah.
What kind of trip were you saying you were on? I'm not understanding that.
I'm a bird watcher.
Oh, bird. Okay. I didn't know what you were saying.
So
I get that. Yeah.
it's a trip
So
to me.
Can you talk a little bit about the risk? I think a couple people asked about visiting people. If you've had your vaccine or if you've only had one of your vaccines, and it sounds like if the other people have had their vaccines, then we're all good to go. But if you're visiting somebody who hasn't had their full vaccination, can you talk about that scenario a little bit?
Yeah, so it's more or less what we were saying. So you can have peace of mind in terms of your own risk if you're vaccinated. There is this chance that I really believe that science will clear this question. But there is this concern about whether you'll be fine, but you could be a vector. You could transmit. So I guess if you're getting together with others, I guess my first question would be, what's the vaccination status of everyone else?
Mm-hmm.
And then if anyone is not, I guess you have to assume that you can still, transmit.
Do you have any data on the liability for the company that's running a trip like this and not well, I mean, I think that, well, that's something we're beginning to look into with Capital City Symphony about if we try to play together or have any outdoor concerts, whatever, what is our liability if somebody then turns around and gets COVID coming to one of our events or gets COVID going on the birding trip? Is the birding company liable? I don't think we know the answer to that either.
I think you have to sign a waiver.
Yeah.
Well, those don't usually stand up in court, so.
Yeah. No, we still have to exercise, we still have to be conservative in our practices, I think, is what in our assumptions and things. I wonder, Pedro, can you say anything? What do we know about the very small number of people for whom the vaccine doesn't work?
We
right?
know,
That sort of,
yeah. So far to me, for what I've been reading, is what is the word? It's anecdotal.
Anecdotal.
Anecdotal in the large numbers. So in the large numbers, we know that there are some, for some people there are adverse effects, and for some people then the amount of antibodies, doesn't go over the threshold in which you can say this person is covered. But in large numbers, I really wouldn't have a concern about that. It statistically always happens. It happens with any and every vaccine.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I just wondered if there was anything that we know about the people for whom it doesn't work that we could understand in case that would apply to anybody in assessing their own risk. That's all. That's what I was.
Yeah. So the concern with this one is, it has this vaccine has some specific challenges in terms of the supply chain and the temperature. It's probably not an issue of the vaccine itself, but how it was stored, how it was administered, and those things.
I see.
Yeah.
I wonder if you read in the news. So DC is planning to, they're proposing to vaccinate based on the chronic conditions, that they're going to put people, who are obese and have other conditions that have been confirmed or suspected of having, of making the morbidity and mortality increase. And there's I'm just reading the article about this, that there's some pushback. People are kind of saying, like, it doesn't make sense to do 25% BMI. It should be 40% BMI, because that's where the real change happens in terms of mortality. Just wonder if you have any thoughts about, kind of the epidemiology of focusing on that group versus the general population versus, I mean, obviously we all want to get the vaccine, but in terms of priorities.
Yeah. So let me see. So risk, this is called risk stratification. It's happening in every state, and they are doing it. So there are federal guidelines, and then every state, and in some cases, counties are using, similar but not equal, not exactly the same approach. Mm-hmm. So the idea is you need to have a risk stratification to know who you're vaccinating first. And as everyone knows that there is a continuous, we call it a dose response, because it increases continuously as the variable changes. For instance, age. Mm-hmm. We know that every year, every increase in 1 year is a certain increase in the risk of not having the infection, but having bad outcomes of the infection. With some conditions, it's more like a binary thing. Like either you have renal disease or not, it's more or less the same. Either you have asthma or not, more or less the same. But with some others, like BMI for overweight and obesity, there is a dose response. What I say is, if your BMI is 30, your risk is slightly higher than if it's 25. If it's 35, it's more than 30, 40 more than 35, and so on. And the question in terms of policy here is, when you have to draw a line somewhere, and you want those vaccines that are still just a few to be, right in target in terms of high risk. Mm-hmm. So I understand, and I agree with the idea of stratifying risk. And then I won't say much in terms of where you draw the line, because that depends also on how many vaccines you have. So if you have just a few, you probably want to be very accurate in using those vaccines in the highest and highest risk. And then you can go, down. Mm-hmm. You can move down. So obesity is one of the most, it proved to be, besides of age, one of the most severe risk factors for bad outcomes. Almost like if you were a severe smoker, which is terrible for your lungs, and also it's associated with bad outcomes, with mortality, basically. Yeah.
Okay. What do we know at this point about treatments?
Sorry?
Good question.
What do we know at this point about treatments? I mean, what's the progress being made that if you do get sick and ended up in the hospital, there might be a treatment for you so that you don't end up on a ventilator?
Yeah. So when we think about treatments, we basically usually we separate them into those that are curative and those that are palliative, basically. So we still don't have much, and there were no many developments in terms of curative therapeutics treatments. There are two therapeutic approaches that are approved. One is an antiviral drug called remdesivir, and it showed to be effective, although it's super expensive. There's a shortage, and it is. I have to say, it's basically not available for general population. The other one is the use of what is called antibodies for recovering patients, in which, and it's also very effective. It's more effective than the drug. It's based on recovering plasma from someone who had the disease, and then you would recover antibodies from that patient who is recovering, and you would administer those antibodies to someone who is sick. It's the problem there is basically shortage. We would need to have like massive amounts of people donating blood among those who recover to be able to have enough enough amount of antibodies to administer. So they are being used, they are approved, and they are being used only for patients that are in critical condition. So, sorry. What I'm saying is, in terms of curative therapeutics, there's no much. This is what we know. But in terms of symptomatic or palliative treatments, there were some lessons learned. And for instance, the use of steroids early, they made a change. They really changed the path in terms of curation or mortality. And then one thing that it's already known, and it was known from before, is timeliness. So the earlier you get those steroids or oxygen is seems to be such a silly thing, but it changes the prognosis so much. You just need to have it in time. Just summarizing, not much on the curative side, and a few lessons learned on the symptomatic side that are helpful. But still, you see the numbers, you see the mortality day by day. So obviously, we're not doing good on that front in general.
Yeah, go ahead, Ann.
When you get the first shot, does that protect you at all, or how much?
No, it doesn't. The first shot protects you, but basically the idea is it primes the immune system for the second shot, which will be the one that lasts in time. Having said this, your risk is never the same after the first one, but it's about 40%, 50%. It depends, but you're not fully covered.
It's a little better.
You're better. Not done.
Yeah. Who was Daphne? I think you had a question about kind of timing contact with somebody who'd been in the hospital. Did you get enough information?
Someone who has surgery and wants me to give them a ride home. And I have, like I said, I hadn't had anybody in my car because it's a confined space. And she will have had her first shot. She obviously has to have a COVID test before surgery. So then they wouldn't be doing surgery if she wasn't COVID, if it didn't come back negative. What would be, and by then I will have just had my first shot that morning. What is the risk of giving her, I haven't told her I'll give her a ride home yet, because I wondered what my risk would be giving her a ride home. If we both wore masks, did she sit in the back seat, windows open? What would you advise?
I guess I would ask you, so this is a tricky one, because you being vaccinated that same day, it's like you were not vaccinated. And on this person's case, on her case, even though I'm sure she has a COVID test negative, I would like to know when was she vaccinated. But I wonder. So I think she's fine, mostly because of the vaccine. But you're not covered. You're not protected. So I guess my question is, and she's coming from a healthcare facility, which is very high risk, even if she had a test. Mm-hmm. So I guess I would ask you how long, all the measures to be in a car. You just said them. Mm-hmm. I would ask you one key data point is how long is a trip, because it's different if it's like 5 or 10 minutes or you will be 40 minutes in the car.
Yeah, it's probably about half an hour.
And then I would assume she probably needs some help getting from the car into her home, right?
I don't think so. It's risk. I can't for that risk surgery.
Oh, okay.
I think Daphne, I wouldn't be so concerned about her because she's been vaccinated, but you are not covered.
Okay.
You're not protected. Maybe if you could, I know you already have a probably an appointment for the vaccine, but having the vaccine that same day is like not having it for this particular case.
And my other question was, once my little pod that I have here on Capitol Hill, all of us will have had both vaccinations and the 2-week period afterwards, probably by the 1st of March. Could we then actually have dinner together at that point? Right now, we meet outside, we swap dishes, and then go back to our houses and eat by ourselves.
Yeah, I would say that if everyone in the group was vaccinated and that 1 to 2 weeks after the second shot already passed, your risk is extremely, extremely, extremely low. I would have dinner.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yay! I know.
Something to look forward to.
It is.
As someone who's had the first shot, I would also add to Daphne that the only reaction I had was my arm really hurt a lot. And I did not feel like driving my car the day that I got the first shot.
Mm. Oh, that's interesting too.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good to know, because I've had a really sore arm after the shingle shot, after a rabies shot. I tend to get really sore arms.
In general sense, for everyone who is or will be vaccinated, it's good to remember that within the first 3 days, besides of having a sore arm, you can have like a flu syndrome. Even some temperature, weakness, joint pains, and that's completely normal, and it's related to the vaccine. Doesn't mean that the vaccine didn't work. In fact, it means that your immune system is reacting.
Yeah. Is the converse true? If you don't react, does that mean you're not having a robust response?
No, not at all. Not at all.
It's good to know too.
Yeah, good to know.
I see Maureen there. Maureen has been very quiet. I don't know if you had any specific questions, Maureen, that you wanted to.
Thank you. No, they've been answered, which was
okay.
Yeah, and so thank you. But is it a week or 10 days or 2 weeks after you have the second shot that you should feel comfortable?
So technically it's 1 week, and I know the guidelines are saying 10 days to 2 weeks, 10 to 14 days, just as a margin of safety, but we are good to go after the first week, after the second shot. Yeah.
Okay.
I thought I read it was different for the 2 different vaccines. That the Pfizer one was slightly shorter and the Moderna one was slightly longer.
Those are speculations. In fact, we know that there's a difference in terms of the interval between doses. For one, you wait 21 days for Pfizer. For Moderna, you have to wait 28 days. But the amount of time that it's required for you to be fully covered, it shouldn't be so different. If it is, it's 1 or 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I remember there was conversation about, whether it made sense to try to get everybody 1 dose before, and is better than, I do recall learning that, the 21 days and the 28 days are minimums. What do we know about, if how far out can you go and still get the maximum protection? How far apart can the booster be from the and still effective?
So I guess the answer for this one, Judy, is the right answer is we don't know, because of how the vaccines these vaccines were developed and tested. But we know for other vaccines that are exactly as you say, those are minimum days, and that time can vary. And I wouldn't be concerned if I get my second shot even many weeks after the first one. Okay. But because that's what we know for measles and rubella and other vaccines. In this case, we have only one clinical trial, and those were the intervals where the vaccines were tested.
Yeah, if people are calling and they're worried if they can't get exactly 28 days, and like, no, 29 days, you're probably.
Oh
it's
yeah,
probably
no,
okay,
no reason to panic.
that-
No reason to panic. I would say, like, if it's
Right.
1 or 2 weeks, you're still fine. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you know about any new vaccines that are coming down the pike? That are I guess, is it Johnson & Johnson is talking about getting close to the end of a trial?
That's one, and the other one, it's a vaccine that they're waiting for an FDA approval maybe next week. It's coming from India. I think the name is COVAX, but there are so many in the pipeline. I can check that and be back, but there are so many. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if like a month from today we have like another 3 or 4 vaccines in the market.
Well, do you think they'll all be as effective? Are they looking like they're all as effective, or is there different? Because I know they're all different types, right? They're not all the RNA.
No, right. The coming vaccines, one is what we call it's attenuated. Sorry for my English. It's a milder version of the same virus. And there's one DNA that probably won't make it all the way. I think those are but yes, are different technologies. It was probably, I don't know if it was a coincidence, but the ones we have right now in the market are the same technology. So it's easier for, yeah.
Okay.
But I as much as I regret some of them, the rushed recommendations or guidelines from the agencies and the scientific community, I rely on the FDA. When they approve, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And then many, like hundreds of countries in the world, they don't have the agencies and the technology to evaluate, and they just look at the FDA. Like the country where I'm coming from. Like we didn't have an agency. We just looked at the FDA.
I have another question.
Go ahead, Daphne.
What do you know about, they talk about a vaccine passport for travel. Any comments on what we might need to show for future travel?
Yeah, well, they will. I don't know if that will be a policy at some point. I think it would make sense, even cross borders, and mostly in a case where, for instance, I don't know. My closest example is Canada and the US. They're using the same vaccine, so there's no reason to think that coming from a place where you got vaccinated, it's not good enough as if you were vaccinated in the other country. But in general, they will give you this sort of certificate after the first dose, which is basically what, I don't know who in the group was saying. It's a little piece of paper that says when your second shot should be given. It's not more than that. But after the second one, you get a card. You get this sort of card, this certificate. And if at any point there was like vaccination passport, it would be that piece of paper.
I was thinking of taking my yellow card with me.
Oh, the yellow card where you have for instance, your yellow fever vaccination, the international one.
Yep.
I don't know if that would be necessary. That card, it's multilateral. It's a global agreement and it's valid. But I don't think it would be necessary because most of the people, they don't have a yellow card.
Let me just, since I did get the first dose, so the card has 2 sides, and on the back of the card is where they marked my second appointment, but the front of the card is what will be the official card. They wrote in the date and the vial number and the type. I got the Moderna, and then there's a space for the second one. So I'm confident that's all I'm going to get.
Yeah, I'm sure that's all you need.
Great. Any other questions for Pedro?
This has been very helpful.
Yes, it has. Thank you.
I'm so glad. These were all the questions I'm working with, and you're right on top of the issues.
So you think by May we're going to be in better shape, even those of us who don't seem to fall into the highest risk or the risk stratification?
Let me see if I can share just one piece of screen with you.
Okay.
Let me know if if you're on your screen.
It's coming up.
And you see
There we go.
it's coming up. Okay, so this is and this is a pretty safe, even conservative model. And what you see here is, so one of the lines, the darker one, is the United States, and the second one that goes below is District of Columbia.
Oh.
And you have a vertical line that says today. This is what I took this today from their website. And you can see how after April and arriving to May, the projections of these are daily infections, are really going down. And one thing that could destroy this projection is, I don't know, a really different mutation of the virus that kills the vaccine, something like sort of catastrophic. But otherwise, I think we're going in that direction.
That's very comforting.
Yeah.
So one thing, just for those of you who haven't talked to Pedro before, one thing that Pedro's been very helpful with is sort of helping us think about the village, and how the village can operate safely, and what's safe to do and what's not to do. So we'll have that conversation again soon about when maybe we can talk a little bit about what kinds of things we can start planning again, and when. Fortunately, we're getting into the warmer months, and so outdoors, particularly in the spring, outdoors will continue to be an option, or we'll resume being an option, which will be nice. But I know we're all anxious to get together in person and break bread, drink coffee, drink a martini, whatever whatever floats your boat,
I don't know if people can see this, but this is my card that I got.
Oh,
Yeah, we all, looks very familiar.
And so it's just specific for this particular disease.
Can I ask, has anybody, and Pedro, I don't know if you know anything about VSafe?
Oh yeah, I'm on VSafe.
Yeah. Do you want to say what's your experience been so far?
Nothing.
About
I don't even know what it is.
Okay.
Well, let Pedro explain, but I did it. I got the app on my phone and they sent me a thing every day and I filled it out of what my, any symptoms. Mine were chills that I had for a couple of days periodically. And, but it was easy to use and I'm not good at this stuff, so.
I don't have much to say. I haven't followed the implementation of the app.
Yeah, it's the CDC. It's created to track people who've been vaccinated, to track side effects, to track illness. So it's a continuous sort of monitoring system. But they will also, if you have questions or if you're showing severe side effects, I mean, they'll check in on you. If you say you have questions or concerns and things. So it's kind of good that way. And they'll send you a reminder for your second vaccine. So.
Yeah, and they give you the form when you get the first dose, they give you the form of what to fill out. And I assume it's a way for the CDC to see also how things are going.
Well, you could ask if you want to come over here.
Not to panic anyone, but this is what happens with all the development, every development process for vaccines or even drugs. So when they get approved on what is called the phase 3, then the last phase, it's on the market and it's still part of the evaluation. But you need like very large numbers of population to identify adverse effects that have very, very low incidence. And the only way you can do that is throwing the technology, in this case the vaccine, in the market and collecting information. It's the surveillance phase.
Go ahead, Steve.
How do you feel about stands and outdoor sporting events like football or soccer or baseball?
I have a personal conflict with that because I'm a soccer player. I'm missing it so much. On those sports that are considered to be contact sports, there's always some risk. The fact that they happen outdoors makes me, everyone has a risk acceptance threshold. And for my mental health, if I get to play soccer outdoors, I go and do it because what I believe is it worth. If any risk, it is worth it for my mental health. But in general, and I don't want to make my case the case, but if it's outdoors, it's fine. If there's not a lot of contact, much better.
Well, how about going to Audi Field to watch a soccer game? You've been vaccinated. That's
yeah. Yeah, keep you keep your mask on and you keep social distance, as we were saying, even if you were vaccinated, for the risk of others that you don't know if they were vaccinated. But I would go. I would do it.
After your vaccine, should you go check and see if you have antibodies? Is that going to be a common practice?
It shouldn't be.
No.
It shouldn't be. No. I think it's a waste of resources, given that that's where the clinical trials and the tests were made for. Potentially, if it happens that you were gonna get blood work for anything, you want to check your antibodies in a specific case, fine, but not systematically. No need.
Go ahead, Ann.
Yeah, I guess the only exception there is if you have immune system issues or any reason to suspect that you won't react to the vaccine.
Thank you.
What was I going to say? How long will it be before they decide whether this is going to be something you do yearly or not, like the flu vaccine?
It's unknown. We still don't know how long. There are good reasons to assume that these antibodies, they last, if not forever, for many years. But we don't know. We really don't know that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that true of the flu antibodies? Do they last and it's just that the flu changes, or do we get flu vaccines because the antibodies don't last?
So both things are true. So the amount of antibodies tends to decrease over time, but then every year the virus changes. Right. So yeah, so both things.
Both things.
But the main reason why we get vaccinated every single year is because of the mutations, the different strains of the virus.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Listen, before I forget, I should have said this at the very beginning. I've been recording this because whenever Pedro comes on, it's always very interesting. But I hadn't made plans to share it anywhere. But if anybody has any objection to this being posted any place available, I will simply delete it. I just meant to tell you that earlier on, and I didn't get a chance to do it. But I guess we're getting close to 2 o'clock. Are there any last questions that you want to ask? Pedro has always been very kind about responding to emails too. So I'm sure if you think of something that you need to know, we can connect you.
Yeah, it just occurred to me. I'm on medication for rheumatoid arthritis. Would that affect my vaccination at all?
That the answer, it depends on what type of medication you are, because some of the therapeutics, the treatments for arthritis, they affect potentially your immune response. But it depends on what. Feel free to reach out by email, and if you want to share what you're taking, I'm happy to answer.
I have one more thing to add. When I went for my shot, there was a new questionnaire to fill out. And one of the questions was, had I been vaccinated for anything else within the last 30 days? And I had gotten the Shingrix vaccine, and the person administering it said that was okay because it had been more than 2 weeks. But I think he would have not vaccinated me if my Shingrix vaccine had been within 2 weeks.
Yeah, so it's like a specific case, but when you, and it doesn't go for all the vaccines, but if you had a vaccine that was based on live virus, like alive versions of the virus, like the shingles one, your immune system is a little less likely to respond to any vaccine during the first couple of weeks. So that's why it's not a risk for you, but it's reduced likelihood of developing antibodies for COVID if you just had certain types of vaccine, mostly the vaccines that are based on viable virus. But if it was 4 weeks, I wouldn't be concerned.
It was 2 weeks.
That's right there.
It was more than 2 weeks, actually. It was like 2.5 weeks.
You know, this is a good example of a case in which I would probably go and check my antibodies response after the second dose, just to make sure.
Okay.
Like we were saying, in a case by case basis, this is a case when it could, there's room for checking.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Pedro, and thank you to everybody for joining us for this conversation. It's always interesting.
Will you show us, will you send us his email?
I will absolutely, yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. I will absolutely share the email.
I'm so glad with this conversation. Thank you, Judy, for organizing it. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, and I'm so glad that everybody seems like everybody's got appointments and we're getting there. We're getting there. Very exciting. What's that, Deb?
I was going to ask you, rheumatologist. I'm on a couple drugs for rheumatoid arthritis too, and he's been very pointed about saying this is not a risk and this, etc. So you might ask your rheumatologist. They probably know.
Okay.
Great. All right, everyone. Have a great weekend. We'll
Thank
talk to you all
you.
soon. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
It was worthwhile.
Yeah, I think so too.